And away we go.
Interestingly enough, I don't know if you got a chance to check out today's episode yet, on the podcast. That it was someone that I've known since I was probably 15 years old, and we connected on Facebook probably 10 or 15 years ago, and then we got into it on Facebook, and then we disconnected again. I, I had someone tell me, "Hey, I've got someone that you should have on your podcast." And so I was like, "Okay, who is it?" And he said, "Well, it's Chris Aber." And by the time I responded to him, I said, "Have you talked to him?" He's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Did you tell him it was me?" And he said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay." I was kind of surprised. So we got on.
Oh,
We're having a
right.
great conversation, and then in the middle of the conversation, I said, "Well, I need to point out here, because we're having an amazing conversation." And I said, "I need to point out here that you and I didn't get along when we were younger." And he's like, "No, we didn't." And it's because of his trauma and my trauma. He pushed my buttons and I pushed his buttons because of what we've gone through. And and then we both came out, and I didn't know that he was going through any of that. The stuff he told me on the podcast, I didn't know he was going through any of it. And then he told me that once he started listening to the podcast, he couldn't, but he had no idea I was going through any of that. He thought that I came from a wealthy 2-parent family and that I was some snobby asshole. And I thought he was just some little guy running around running his mouth, and didn't realize that and there was a lot of growth in that because we're all trying to hide it. We're all trying to show the world we're something we're not. It's kind of how we're raised, kind of how society functions. But that was so personal, glaringly personal. Here's this person I wasn't able to get along with for all these years, to find out at the core the things that are really important. We had that in common that I don't have in common with 98% of the people I know, but to have that strong of a connection in the things that are important, but we never were able to get to that because we were hiding it with all this other superficial stuff. It was an amazing experience.
I think that that's common. I mean, not that you disconnect and come back together, but I often feel this sense of sadness about not understanding how trauma looked as a younger person,
Yeah.
especially the trauma of sexual abuse, right? Like, and when young people that have been abused are like sexualized, and for girls they're going to get labeled, right, like as all these bad, negative, stigmatizing things. And the pain of what happened is so deeply wounding enough that it breaks my heart to think that as a culture and even as helpers we make that worse all the time. Like the kids that are acting out, the ones that are like fighting, and they're like struggling. This is not about bad kids. This is about kids that don't have the resources to emotionally regulate themselves like this. And we punish instead of help. And I just feel like the help is so welcome and rewarding, and even just those few people that you really connect to, that you feel like you know can see your pain, or whether they can or not, they care about you. That is the magic. And we deprive people of the magic, I think, because they don't know about trauma, because they don't really understand that that's what's going on. It's not naughty bad kids, it's like kids that need help.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is what we should be teaching these kids in school.
Yeah.
We should teach kids to understand themselves. That's the first thing we should teach kids, is to be able to try to learn to look inward and be able to become self-aware, self-evaluate, self-regulate. And we don't. We just treat them
I
like
know.
cattle. Just put 30 in a room and then take all 30 of them to lunch and take all 30 of them to the next class. And it's really a shame. We're doing a disservice.
So
And
damaging.
I don't know if it's irreversible on a global scale, unless we have a radical shift immediately, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I hope I say that, and I hope humanity has a way of counterbalancing things, and necessity is the mother of invention. And I hope that what going through now, I'm a dreamer like the rest of us. So, I've been accused of being a bleeding heart liberal tree hugger, but I hope that what we're going through now is the beginning of an awakening for the young people to see that the old ways really aren't working. We know that. We've been talking about that for a while, but we have to do something different. And shutting everything down the water has cleared up, the air has cleared up, and we've learned that kids don't have to spend 8 to 9 hours in a classroom, that they can do it in 90 minutes online, and people can work remotely from home and get more productivity. And they could probably only work 30 hours a week rather than 40 or 50 hours a week and get the same kind of productivity. And I hope that this is spurring change, that as we're going to change as humanity. And I'd like to see more of this kind of stuff, which is obviously why I started the podcast, so we can bring awareness and talk about it a little more.